What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be ranking the 10 first overall draft picks in the NBA throughout the 2010s, from 2010 to 2019. And to start it all off, we have at number 10, Anthony Bennett. Now, this should come as no surprise to anybody because he's considered to be one of the biggest draft busts in NBA history. Throughout his career, he averaged only 4.4 points, 3.1 rebounds, and 0.5 assists per game on 39% shooting. He only played 151 games in the NBA, and if we're being really honest, he should have never been the first overall pick in that draft. While that draft was very, very weak, he still was considered to be maybe a lottery pick, but the late lottery, maybe picks 10 through 14 prior to the draft. And the week before the draft, he shot up people's draft boards for no apparent reason, and the Cleveland Cavaliers ended up taking him number 1 overall. So, in all honesty, he is definitely number 10 on this list, and he is probably a top 3 to 5 bust of all time in my eyes. Coming in at number 9, we have Markelle Fultz, who kind of just had bad luck. And while he is kind of turning around his career now, he will always be in the limelight with guys like Jason Tatum, Lonzo Ball, and even Kyle Kuzma, who are in the same draft class as him. And that being said, obviously, in retrospect, he doesn't deserve to be the number 1 overall pick, but he was a very hyped up prospect coming out of university. And throughout his NBA career, he's averaged 11.8 points, 3.4 rebounds, and 5 assists per game on 47% shooting. And I think the biggest thing that kind of knocked down his game was his initial injury, and after his injury, just his complete failure of confidence in those seasons after his injury. And Philadelphia eventually moved on from him, but I do believe that if he had been able to continue to develop, he would have developed into a very fine NBA player and point guard. But it's just unfortunate how injuries and a lack of confidence can really mess with someone. And I'm glad to see him kind of having a resurgence this year with Orlando, especially with Orlando being a top team. But he is not really deserving of being a number 1 overall pick, especially in the draft that he was in. So that's why I have him at number 9. At number 8 on this list, we have Ben Simmons. And if you look at his accolades, you may not think that he deserves to be this low on the list because he won Rookie of the Year in 2017-2018. He was an All-NBA player in 2020, and he's a 3-time All-Star, as well as being a 2-time All-Defensive Team player. But he just has not been able to stay on the court, and he's had some reported off-the-court issues that have just led to him not being available to play, and this also includes him just being unable to shoot a basketball and not seeming to develop any type of offensive game whatsoever. This season, in 6 games, he's averaging only 6.5 points a game and 10.8 rebounds a game, which is amazing on the rebounds end. But when it comes to scoring the basketball, he can just not put the ball in the basket, and he's shooting 25% from the free throw line. For his career, he's a 59% free throw shooter, and within the last few years, he's just not been able to score the ball, and his scoring ability has actually taken a massive step back. In his first season, he averaged 15.8 points per game, and in his first 4 seasons, he averaged 14 or more points a game every single season. But then after the 2021-22 season, where he did not play and where he had a back injury / holdout, he came back and averaged only 6.9 points per game last year and 6.5 points per game this year. And this is such a sad story of a player with all the talent in the world who just did not develop the way that we thought he would, as well as being a little bit ego-driven, it seems like, and a little bit fragile, to the point where he took a whole year off and just sometimes it seems like refuses to play games and refuses to take shots. Most notably is the time in the Atlanta series with Philadelphia where he passed up an open layup and passed the ball to a teammate when he had a wide open layup. And he just has never been able to polish his offensive game, and that's why he sits in number 8 on my list. At number 7, we have DeAndre Ayton, who was taken first overall in the 2018 NBA draft. He was taken ahead of the likes of Luka Doncic and Trae Young, which is why this pick in retrospect doesn't look amazing, but he has been a solid NBA player through the course of his career. While he's never been an all-star or up for any real accolades, he's averaged 16.4 points and 10.4 rebounds on 59.6% shooting throughout his career. And while on the Phoenix Suns, he was able to be a key contributor in a finals run and some deep playoff runs, but he ultimately just did not fit in Phoenix and now is sitting on Portland this year. And while his points per game has dipped a little bit, he has still been a solid contributor for them and is still averaging a double-double with about 13 and 11 per game. And I still think that he has a lot of potential. Like, he could become a maybe 2 to 3 time All-Star throughout his career, but he just doesn't measure up to some of the other All-NBA type players within his draft class. At number 6, we have Andrew Wiggins, and this is where the list gets a little bit hard to make just because you have some guys who have been in the league a long time and have been all-star caliber players, but just never really the type of player to change the franchise and not really a number 1 overall pick status, or you have guys that are still young in their NBA careers and still have a lot more to prove. So with Andrew Wiggins, his career averages are 19 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.3 assists per game. And throughout his younger age in Minnesota, he was a high volume scorer that just never really played on any winning teams. And then when he got to Golden State in 2019-2020, then he still was a good scorer and a good defender, but started playing on more winning teams. In 2021-22, he had his only All-Star season, and this was actually the year that Golden State won a championship. And it's very arguable that he was the second best player on that championship team, and especially the second best defender behind Draymond Green. And he was a key contributor in a championship run, but just hasn't had the ideal career for a number 1 overall pick. He's never been the number 1 option, but he's still been a very solid contributor throughout his career. So I think that for a number 1 pick, he has been solid but not outstanding, and that's why he lands at number 6 on the list. At number 5, we have Zion Williamson, and if you look based on stats alone, you would wonder why Zion is so far down this list, because he has been dominant in the little time that he's been on the floor. But the problem with Zion is that he's had a hard time staying on the floor in general. In his draft year of 1920, he only played 24 games, but in the time on the court, he averaged 22.5 points a game and 6.3 rebounds a game on very good efficiencies. And then the next year, he was an all-star, averaging 27 points a game in 61 games played. But that 61 game mark is the highest that he's ever played. And in the year after that, he missed the entire season with a foot injury, and then had an all-star bounce-back season last year, but only played 29 games. So it's very frustrating to see a player with this much talent only be able to play in so few games because of injuries. This year, he's had a good start to the season, has maintained relative health, but it's still just concerning to see how much time he has missed, and that's why I cannot rank him higher on this list, because of how inconsistent his playing time has been. But throughout his career, he's been a very effective player, averaging 25 points and 7 rebounds a game while on the court, on 60% field goal efficiency, and he has shot 35.2% from 3, which is higher than lots of people expected coming out of Duke. In a few seasons' time, he very well may rank up this list, but for now, I have to put him at 5 because we just have not seen what he's fully capable yet of, and we just haven't seen him stay healthy for a prolonged period of time. So that's why I have to rank him so low. At number 4, we have KarlAnthony Towns, a center for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he's been a 3-time All-Star and 2-time All-NBA player, as well as the 2015-2016 Rookie of the Year. And he's been a solid player, an above-average center throughout his career, averaging 23 points and 11 rebounds a game, and has been one of the better shooting centers of all time. And I put him this high because he's had such a scoring impact on the game and has had an impact on shooting centers throughout his career. but he's never really played on a winning team until this season. And this season, the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards and KarlAnthony Towns have been so much better than they have been in years. And it's exciting to see, especially because now as KarlAnthony Towns is kind of the second offensive option, or even in a 1A, 1B situation with Anthony Edwards, he's able to thrive a lot more in a pick and pop or just a shooting role, especially with having Rudy Gobert anchoring the defense. So I do think that he has had a very successful career, and while he may not have the resume or track success in the playoffs that others have, he has been a very polished center, especially offensively, and has been a top 3 offensive center throughout his career. At number 3, we have John Wall, and this is a very confusing case when it comes to number 1 overall draft picks, because John Wall's peak was about as good as anybody on this list, but his peak was only about 5 or 6 years long, and since 2019 he's just been plagued by injuries. He missed 50 games in 2018-2019 with injuries, and then in 2019-2020 he did not play at all with left heel, Achilles, and infection injuries. And on the flip side of that, throughout his prime, he was 5-time an All-Star and was one of the best point guards in the NBA. He matched up to almost any point guard in the entire association because of his quickness, speed, and athleticism when it came to finishing inside. He was also a great playmaker, averaging 10 assists a game in multiple seasons, and for his career, he averaged 18.7 points and 8.9 assists per game, while having those numbers kind of deflated by some later years where he hasn't been as effective. And he's a 5-time All-Star and 1-time All-NBA player, as well as being an All-Defensive Team member in 2014-2015. And I do think that he deserves being up here because his peak was so high. And it was a little bit prolonged for 5 or 6 seasons. And I do think that without injuries, he would have been a very, very good player. And lots of people today do not give him the respect or credit that he deserves based on how good he was within his prime. At number 2, we have Uncle Drew, Kyrie Irving, who has won a championship with LeBron James and was a key member of that 2016 team that came back from 3-1 down and beat the Golden State Warriors. While Kyrie has had his off-the-court problems, on the court, he has been absolutely incredible throughout his entire career, and this season is having one of his better seasons in the league. He's an 8-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA type player, and is a 2016 champ, as I mentioned. He's averaged 23 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists a game throughout his career, and has consistently been one of the best point guards when he's on the floor. Now, of course, his off-the-court issues take away a little bit from his career and reputation, but in terms of basketball skill, he's one of the most skilled players of all time, and is considered one of the best ball handlers of all time, right alongside Allen Iverson. And finally, at number 1, we have Anthony Davis. And him and Kyrie have very similar resumes, and both of them have not been able to stay on the court for one reason or another, with Kyrie being more off-the-court issues, with Anthony Davis just being very injured throughout his career, with one of his basketball reference nicknames literally being Street Clothes Davis, which is kind of funny, but still very unfortunate, and he just has not been able to stay on the court. But the reason I put him at number 1 is his all-around game. He's a very good scorer and has averaged 24 points a game on 52% shooting, and has developed a mid-range shot throughout his career, as well as averaging 10.5 rebounds a game and being one of the better defensive players throughout his career. He's led the NBA in blocks 4 times and has averaged 2.3 blocks and 1.3 steals throughout his career. He won a championship in the bubble with LeBron James and is an 8-time All-Star and 4-time All-Defensive Player. And he, just goes without saying, is one of the better players in the league, and I think without injuries, he would be considered one of the better big men of this generation. However, it's very unfortunate how injuries can really destroy a career, and while he's kind of battled back and been able to maintain a long career in the NBA, you can only imagine what he would be without the injuries. Anyways, God bless you all. I hope you have an amazing day. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you've made it to this point, because I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by April, so make sure to subscribe. God bless.